Okay, so this video is going to be quite a while, it's going to be pretty long. A lot of people ask themselves and other people, how am I supposed to play casually when I am a competitive player? These are the people that have loads of cards, they've spent loads of money on the game, they know what they're doing, they're characterised as a Spike, or even if they do characterise themselves as like a Timmy or a Johnny, they're a really competitive Timmy or a Johnny. And the idea is that without being cocky, it's a factual statement to say that you are better than the people you play against, you have better cards than them, you know more things than them, and if you don't hold yourself back in some way, you will probably have a 70-80% win rate against them, which isn't fun for you, and it isn't fun for them, and it just isn't good for anyone involved. Now, again, without sounding like cocky or big-headed or anything, I come from a place in England that's very rural. England itself is already very small in the Magic the Gathering community. It's not tiny, but it's not big. And a rural area of England, my F&Ms have between 8 and 15 people, and there are 2 shops within 30 miles. There's not much stuff. And the people that do go to the shops are either old-time returning casual players, or newcomers that have just gotten into the game, or have gotten into the game in the last couple of months. So the idea is, as you can see, I'm on Gather, I've got some tabs open. You can read my notes if you want to read them before I start speaking about them, that's up to you. The biggest thing is, if you want to bring yourself, you don't want to bring yourself down to their level, but if you want to be able to play competitively and do your very best, you're going to have to adjust something. And you can't adjust your play, because as a player, you always want to do the best you can. You always want to perform as strong as you can to give yourself the highest percentage chance of winning, because that's what a competitive sport or competitive game is supposed to do. You're meant to try your hardest, and you're meant to want to win. So I can't say to you, if you have 7 cards in your hand, they have 4 cards in their hand, turn 1, whatever, not turn 1, but they mulliganed out for whatever, don't bother casting Thoughtseize because it's mean. That's not going to help anybody, and it's especially not going to help people that are competitive, because they know, well, I'd expect them to do it to me. I expect people to play their best, but the trouble is their best is a little worse than your best. And it's not their own fault, it's just they don't have the 5 years experience, they don't have the $5,000 spent on cards or whatever. They're just a world behind. So we cannot limit the way we play the game. That means we have to limit our deck, what we have, the tools that we have to use. But the trouble is we don't want to limit it so much that it feels like it's something that's useless to us and it's just letting us down. What we need to do is we need to be able to build our own decks, or have other people build our decks for us, that are competitive, do have options, do have strategy, thoughts, stuff that you can think of, thoughts and stuff you can think about, but a lot of stuff that you can do, stuff that you can adjust, stuff that you can make yourself win with, but it's not guaranteed. Sometimes you will just get outclassed, sometimes your opponent can outplay you, because your card quality isn't so much that it doesn't matter if you make mistakes. So, first off, the very first section of this video, there might be some cuts because I'm not going to be able to talk for 25 minutes solid. If there are, just don't mind them. A pre-made deck. This is when someone else has done it for you. This means you don't really know what's going on with it. I mean, you can figure out what the deck's doing, obviously, but you don't feel like you've tailor-made it for yourself, so that might not be for some people. Some of these options won't be for some people, that's fine. Just think about it. Likewise, don't do all of these options, else you'll cripple yourself. Event decks. Over here, there is a list of all the event decks that have ever been published. Look through them. They come in pretty much every cover combination, sort of. Some of them are pretty cheap, some of them are a bit more expensive. Find one that appeals to you most, buy it, sleeve it up, take that to a modern F&M or a standard F&M, and just play that. And then, depending on how well it performs, if some cards let you down, adjust them for different cards. Don't strictly improve them. Some of these decks have main deck Duress or Despise. Don't just upgrade that to a Thoughtseize. Switch it to something else. Switch it to the other one. Shut up, cat. Fucking cats in every video. If they're playing Duress and the Duress lets you down, move the Duresses to the sideboard and main deck Despise. Or main deck that new Transgress the Mind from the new Zendikar set. Or put something like Inquisition of Kozilek in or something. There's a couple other single mana discard spells. Play something Raven's Crime, where you target your opponent and you give them the choice. Don't just put strictly better cards in, put different cards in, so that you're not upgrading the card quality, but you're fixing the problems with the event deck. If event decks aren't your thing, intro decks are definitely not going to be anybody's thing, especially not as a competitive player. Almost all the cards are vanilla. None of them are good. Even the rares are a bit of a complete letdown. I wouldn't recommend any competitive player try to play casual with an intro deck because you're just going to frustrate yourself, and then you might get salty that you lost, or you might just feel like, well, there was nothing I can do at all, and then the losses feel like they're out of your hands, and then you don't feel too good. Dual decks, they're fairly good. On this tab I've got all of the dual decks ever published. You could get an anthology and then you've got a selection. Most of the stuff in them is modern legals, and I don't think any of them are standard legal, although Zendikar Eldrazi you could fix into something standard based. The idea behind this is it's a themed deck. I'm going to talk a lot about themed decks later on in the video. And a lot of the cards, some of them are absolute trash, some of them are really strong. For example, in Izzet Golgari there are some really, really, really bad cards in the Golgari side, but likewise there are some really, really, really good cards in the Golgari side. For example, Dredge Mangler is a pretty strong card, especially in casual. Life from the Loam is a ridiculously strong card. Isochron Scepter on the Izzet side of it, that's a very good card to use, but then there's some utter trash in it that you wouldn't want to touch with a barge pole. Like, there's one with like Moe heads on it, and you spend like 3 mana with a kicker of 3, and you can multi-kick it as much as you want, or replicate, or whatever it is, and you can turn all of your lands into 3/3 heads until the end of the turn, something like that. It's just not good, so you'd replace that with something different, not something miles better, not something top tier. You wouldn't start adding like Supreme Verdicts and make it blue-white-red control. You just add something different, something fairly fair. Again, Gin of Wishes, something like that in the Izzet deck is awful. Like, you wouldn't even want to play with it. Yeah, replace the absolute chaff cards with some cards that aren't as bad, but round the theme out. So keep it to what the theme is of the dual deck. Don't just add stuff because it's good. So the Izzet deck, replace some of the bad cards with more Izzet Charms. That's fine. It's a decent card. You get choices. It's actually a very strong card in Modern, for example. You could do that. Then, pick a net deck from online, any format, list out all of the cards in it, assign them a number, roll a dice, and then the stuff you land on, just kick that out of the deck. This is going to be a very mixed bag because you might end up clicking on like, oh, I have Jund, let's kick out 2 of the lands in Liliana, and then it's still a ridiculously overpowered and overpriced deck. It's a weird one. I wouldn't recommend most people do this, but I have done this myself once. I had a Splinter Twin, and I rolled, and I kicked out the 2 combo pieces that weren't Splinter Twin, so I had to make a twin deck that didn't use Twin. I ended up adding cards like Restoration Angel and Huntmaster of the Fells, and I used to just make copies of them because it's good, it's strong, but it's like a 2-card combo to get a wolf and 2 life. It's not overpowered, it's just good, it gives you choices and stuff. Next, if you want a deck, like this is for people that don't want to build their own decks but still want to play casually with their friends. Pick a deck from the budget sections on net decks. So MTG Goldfish has like an entire section for budget standard decks that cost, let's put it into paper, $50, $20, $50. You could just build one of these, and I imagine it wouldn't be too strong for a casual FNM that's standard based. I wouldn't say it's going to be weak or it's going to be fair. Like, you look at some of these, like $1,000, $1,800, and then come down here, it's like 60 and 70. The cards are still good, the decks are still fairly good. You might have to nerf them down a little bit more, but at least you're not going to be like Zombie Hunt is a very fun, very casual deck. It costs 1 ticket, man, $20 though. Like, if you take this deck, Zombie Hunt, to a casual FNM and you throw all your lands into zombies, some people might get pissed off because it's a combo, some people don't like combos, but we're not going to talk about that. Most people aren't going to have a problem with this. They're going to be... It's a one-trick pony, so you shouldn't bring it every week, that's another thing. Don't bring the same deck every week to a casual store. But I think any of these decks should be fine-ish, fine enough. Make some adjustments, make them a bit more casual, start adding themes to them. The biggest thing to talk about in this is themes, but if you don't want to use a pre-made deck, that's just the first section, and you're going to build your own decks, you have to limit what you can build with. For example, you can limit yourself to only build with commons. You can make something like Pauper, Delver of Secrets, with the Ninja guy, with the Cloud of Fairies that just got banned, but it's not banned because you're not playing Pauper, you're playing Modern. And then you can have that skill-based Vapor Snag your own guy, put him in, switching for the ninja, punching, flip your delvers, brainstorm, all that kind. Well, not brainstorm in modern, but you could run serum visions in it because that's technically a common. But you could run an all commons deck that has a lot of strategy in it, but stuff in it like Phantasmal Bear isn't like overpowered. People can play around it, they can mess with it, but you still have the interaction. You can still play a very good, very close game, even though you've limited yourself to commons. All uncommons actually screws you a little bit more than commons because you end up with only non-basic lands that are uncommons. And then you could just go for a peasant and just raid commons and uncommons. Then you could go into like Jewels of the Planeswalkers, Magic Jewels, where they limit you to 4 of each common, 3 uncommons, 2 rares and 1 mythic. Or you could play it on hard mode where you're allowed 3 commons, 2 uncommons and 1 of each rare. This just means you don't say Lightning Bolt's a good card, 4 of them, done. Or Geese to St. Traft is a strong card, 4 of them, done. You have to start having some variance in it, some mix and match, something. You'll see something different every time, you'll have a handful of different stuff, you'll have loads of options, loads of things to think about. But it'll make the deck a bit weaker, it'll make it a bit more prone. It'll give your opponent some more stuff to interact with, that kind of stuff. It just makes the deck more casual, and it doesn't actually hurt you as much as you think, because when you start playing with it, you just have a lot of different options compared to the same option that's really good. So, assuming you have 60 cards, 24 of which are lands, 36 are like actual cards, limit yourself to 2 mythic rares, like 2 different mythic rares, 6 rares that are all different, 10 commons that are all different, and 10 uncommons that are all different, and 18 commons that are all different. And then using this sort of, you can adjust that number, you can adjust those numbers as well. None of this is set in stone, none of these are fixed rules that you have to follow. It's just me suggesting things you can apply to yourself to make yourself more smoothly able to just pierce into a casual setting and just sit down at the kitchen table or sit down at the casual board at F&M and just play some games with people, and they're not going to mind. They're going to have fun, you're going to have fun. It's going to be fair games that are almost on equal footing apart from your skill advantage, and then that's the only thing you have over them, which then makes you feel a little bit better as well. You can make yourself a sealed pool of anywhere from 4 to 10, maybe even more. Just buy yourself a fat pack and build a deck out of it, and then use that for F&M in a constructed event, and you have to see if your sealed deck building is as good as, if not better than, people at F&M are constructing out with everything they have. And some of the people at F&M, the only things they have is 9 boosters worth of cards. So you're actually putting yourself on equal footing to them sometimes, and then some people have more than that, at which point you're playing at a disadvantage, and then your skill has to make up for that. And that's the kind of stuff that's really good to do if you're a heavy spike, very competitive, and very ahead of your local metagame or something. If you use storage boxes like me, and you have a shit ton of like long white boxes, pick out one at random and build your deck entirely out of that one storage box, so that it's mostly commons and uncommons that you store in there, or bulk rares or whatever you've thrown in the box. But it gives you another limitation. It means you're building out of a restricted collection the same as they are. Don't do stuff like On the other hand, you can think like, oh, this is a really good casual card, I'm going to order that offline and then add that to my collection and then build that. That also works. But don't just buy cards offline to pimp out the deck even more, because it just, again, not only do you have the skill advantage, but you have the card advantage. So you have to try and negate at least one of those things, and if we're not allowed to take our own skill away, because that's stupid and not really that possible, and we'd have to deliberately misplay, which then undermines the victories that they get. So we have to take away the collection, or what we can build with what's in the deck. That's what we have to organise. You can use only cards under a certain price, so every card you pick out for a deck, say you're building black-white tokens, you're like, oh man, Elspeth's pretty good. Oh wait, she's $15. No, let's find a $3 alternative or something. You can also limit your deck on budget, which is the same as finding a budget deck up here. And you can only use, for example, you can only use the cards that you have spare that are bulk rares that are in the back of the binder that no one will trade for anyway. You could build something out of them, and then they're not going to waste, they're not gathering dust. And you can actually do something with them, you can play with them, you can experience some different cards that you might have never played with. You could play no duplicate singletons, which is the same thing I suggested up here, but you could do it out of whatever you want, and it means you can't have a consistent deck, and that will throw some people off. It might piss a lot of spikes off, but it's also good for a lot of spikes as well. So if that's what you'd think you'd like, if you're a big fan of Commander, for example, complete singletons, including your lands, like basic lands, that's perfect for you guys. Sticking to 1, 2, 5, or 0 colours is usually the best for casual, because the 3 colours is usually what you find in the best modern decks, like Jund, Junk, Blue, White, Red, Grixis, that kind of stuff. Even Red, Green, Tron sometimes splashes black, but usually the more colours you have, the more fancier lands you have, the better adjustment you have, the more card pool access you have to. If you stick to a monocoloured deck, you cut down what you can think you can use a lot. That doesn't mean, say, one colour, let's go black, let's play Phyrexian Obliterators. That's the opposite of what I'm trying to say. I'm saying stick to just one colour and then play like the average cards in that colour, and then people will be fine with it. 5 colours, very few people get mad if you play 5 colours, especially if... I used to have it. There's a cycle of dragons that cost 3 colours and then 3 colours. Like Intet the Dreamer, there's a couple of others that I can't remember the names of exactly because I haven't played with the deck for so long. But I think there's about 10 dragons, all representing different colours. Some of them are in the Phyrexia Coalition deck, if you remember that. Look a bunch of those up, and then build that dragon deck. Use all of those dragons, and then all singletons, and then all singleton lands, all the guild gates, all that kind of stuff. Throw in a Maze's End, and then build that, and that's a cool deck. It's a bit too casual for some people. It's way too inconsistent for other people. But it's great for the people that like Commander and like big dragons that are spikes and want to play casually. All cards must be a colour, so that means if you go into mono red, you can't then start playing artifacts that are strong in that colour, like equipments like the Sword of Fire and Ice, that kind of stuff. It just means you have to stick to it. Also, you can stick to stuff like all things must be multicolour, or even further than that, you can stick to all things must be multicolour with split costs, like Slitherhead in Golgari or Worm Harvest in Golgari that have the split costs that are green and black, because not only do those cards look cool, but it puts a limitation on you that you can only use a very select few cards, and then you build something out of them. You can have other adjustments on like what creatures you're allowed to use. You can have a deck with only cards with more power than toughness, like Boon Satyr, that kind of stuff, or only stuff with more toughness than power and build like a load of walls. You can even throw in Tarmogoyf if you don't go full graveyard with fetch lands and Thought Seizers, because Tarmogoyf itself isn't that good of a card, it's just the stuff you play with it. This is going to be very unpopular for some people, but it might be worth throwing in for a deck. Only vanilla creatures, but really cool spells or really cool enchantments to put on them. So you could have a deck of nothing but like 1 mana 1/1 cats or 2 mana 2/2 zombies. And then the enchantments you put on them give them the ability spells, and then that's how you do it. The better version of this is only simple text. So for example, you can play Go for the Throat, destroy target non-artifact creature. It's got a couple of words in it. Ultimate Prize, destroy target monocle, or you can just play Murder that says destroy target creature, and you can play a load of cards like that, just destroy target creature, deal 2 damage, target opponent discards a card. Very simple, one line of text, nothing complicated, nothing complex, not because you're going to confuse people, we're not that condescending to think that people don't understand what the cards do, but it puts a limitation on you, because the most basic cards are the ones that seem like Murder costs 3, Go for the Throat costs 2, and the disadvantage is so minimal at times, and Victim of Night has a load of text on it, but it's strictly better than Murder almost. All cards must cost less than X. You can have a deck of only 1-drops, like anything 3 and below, over X, so you could play a deck that doesn't have any plays until turn 3 to give your opponent a chance to do some stuff, get organised, maybe sort out their mana screw or whatever, and you don't start getting the ball rolling until turn 3, 4 or 5 or whatever. All cards must contain an X. So, for example, some cards have X in the mana cost, like the thing that spawns X 1/1 tokens. Other cards have effects that when they hit you, they do something X number of times. You could build a deck with a load of X's in it, or creatures that have X in their power and toughness, but most of the time it's stars. And then, assuming you have 35 cards, 60 cards in your deck, 35 are actual cards, 25 are lands, you could play 5 cards at each mana cost, all of which are different. And you don't have to have a theme to it, because the way you've organised it, you can't have Lightning Bolt. You can have Lightning Bolt, Shock, something else, something else, something else that are all 1 mana, like burn spells. You could have Bump in the Night, you could have stuff like that. And because you haven't played the same card over and over again, it puts a limitation on the deck where it's not as consistent as it should be. But if you like consistency, you can make all your cards from one set. You could pick Innistrad, because that's your favourite set, it's mine, and you could take all of the cards out of it, you could look at them all, you could go, actually I don't think Young Wolf is in, that's whatever set Young Wolf and Strangroot Geist, that kind of stuff. You could build like a mono-green aggro deck, or with Innistrad you could look at some of the zombies, you could build something out of that, the like blue-black zombie reanimation with all 4 ofs. You could have like 4 Scar Ruinators, which is actually an Innistrad, and you could build a deck around that, and you could play all 4 ofs. Forbidden Alchemy is another one. All cards from a block, which is a bit less restrictive than from a set, but it's say you can have 4 offs from a set, you can have 2 offs from a block, and you could say, I like the Theros block, not that anybody does. Sorry to the guys that like Theros, but it was so bad. And you could build a deck out of all the Theros stuff. So you could have 2 Nykthos, 2 Sylvan Caryatids, you could have 2 Boon Satyrs, that kind of stuff. But you limit yourself to what you can use, and that means you can't just look back across every card that's ever been good in Modern, pick the best stuff, ram it into a deck, and rape people with it. No more than X cards from each set, so that's what I just said, X cards from each block, that's what I explained. Oh no, this is a little bit different. So if you say Innistrad's my favourite set, I love it, you're only allowed like 10 cards from Innistrad, and then you have to have 10 cards from Mirrodin, and then 10 cards from New Phyrexia, so that the synergies are a bit off and a bit mixed and a bit weird. 10 cards, like X cards from each block, so you could say I'm only allowed 1 card from each block, and then go through every block that's ever been printed and take 1 card from it and make that into your deck. Or you could just go back to an old standard deck if you remember what people used to play. For example, Naya Humans in the M13, Gatecrash, Innistrad Standard, that kind of stuff. Naya Humans with Boros Reckoner, that kind of stuff. All of the stuff to do with Avacyn and the cities and the towns, Gather the Townsfolk. You could play that deck in Modern, and it was like a tier 2 deck in Standard. So in Modern it would be like tier 4, if not even relevant at all. And you could do that. You could take that to a Constructed Modern event at F&M with casuals, and they'd probably love it, because the theme is sort of there, because they're all from the same sort of time. You can limit what you're allowed to build with, so you could ask yourself, do I want instants or sorceries? And then if you pick instants, no sorceries in your deck, and then that puts a limitation on you, because if you pick sorceries because you want something that draws you a load of cards like Divination or whatever, because you're sticking to casual cards that have simple text on them, then you're not allowed any instants like Shock or Lightning Bolt. It gives you trade-offs, and these trade-offs you get to analyse and think about as a spike and make decisions, and you get to update your deck with, okay, I didn't like it without instants, so take out all the sorcery, put instants in. And then you get to have the food for thought that even if you lost, you can adjust what you lost with, and then adjust the rules, and then play with it a bit. Pick enchantments or artifacts. If you're a deck that likes using, for example, mana rocks to fix your mana, in maybe a Legacy F&M, and you use Sol Ring or whatever. No, you can't use Sol Ring. Oh god. Okay, so Vintage F&M that's casual for some reason. You used to use Sol Ring and Pacifism for whatever reason in the same deck. You now can only use one of them. That was such a terrible example, but bear with me. You could limit yourself to no card that has ever featured in a top 8 deck, ever, apart from basic lands. For Modern, for example. So you could go on to MTG Top 8, I think, or whatever, the search function, and it will show you, because you can type in card names, and it will come up with if that card has ever been featured in a top 8 deck. And if it's got pages and pages of results, don't use it. If it's only got 1 page of results with like 4 decks in it, go for it. So that's what you can limit your building with. So like, those are your deck building limits. So instead of just any card in Modern 60 cards, be able to shuffle it, that kind of stuff, you now have instated yourself more limitations to put yourself on a bit of a leash. You can also limit what your plan is, like your plan of attack to win the game. You can pick an awesome win condition. You could make a Battle of Wits deck, kind of. Lots of people won't like it because they don't like shuffling and the inconsistency. You could build a deck out of Hedron alignment, and you could try really, really hard with it. You could play Mana Leaks, Remand, Serum Visions, all that kind of stuff. Defend it, but what you're defending to try and win isn't as easy as just throwing down a Geist of St. Draft and punching them and winning. It's that you're going to have to figure out how to exile your own hedronic alignment. You're going to have to... The win condition is worse, which makes the deck worse, but the way that you approach it is that you hope that the other cards can back it up, and that your skill can buy enough time to be able to back it up. Or Laboratory Maniac, which I think is misspelt wrong because there's no spell check in Notepad. I don't know why I'm using Notepad. You can make a self-mill deck in like blue-black or green-blue and dredge yourself out and spend the entire time casting like divinations to dredge more, and then hopefully like have another card, Ghoulcrawler's Chant, to bring back Laboratory Maniac from the graveyard to your hand, cast it, dredge yourself the final bit, mill yourself out and win, and then that's how you win. It's extremely slow, it's a pretty bad way to win, but it's fun, it's cool, and it gives you a very big test of skill to try and pull it off. If you don't like epic win conditions that are a pain in the ass, you could just go for a cool win condition, which isn't going to be bad. You could limit yourself to only playing clone cards that do stuff, so you can have your Mana Leaks, your Serum Visions, your Fetch Lands, your Shock Lands, all that stuff. You can try really hard with that. But the only stuff that can win you games and deal damage to the opponent is clones. So that the cards that you're killing them with are only as good as the cards that they have, for example. You could run a deck with Precursor Golem, the guy from Modern Masters that spawns himself and a couple of golems. And then if you target any golems, all of the golems get it. So your opponent could murder it and all your golems go. And that puts you on the back foot, sort of. But you can also Giant Growth your own golem and swing for like easily 18 with the 3 golems because they all gain the Giant Growth. That kind of stuff is very forward and backward, and you get to plan it out, you get to try and defend your combo pieces, that kind of stuff, but the way you're winning is bad. If you want an especially bad, but really, really fucking fun control deck, Reality Strobe, Arcblade, and a couple of others, they're cards from Time Spiral, I think, and they cost 6 mana to cast normally, or you can suspend them, and then every time they come out of suspend and be cast, they go back into suspend after they've done their thing. So Reality Strobe bounces any permanent, Arcblade deals 2 damage, and then they go back out. So you can have 4 of them, 4 of the Strobe. You can have 4 of each in the cycle, and then play 20 cards that come in and out of suspend all the time. You have to have a lot of dice and a lot of awareness. And you can play that as your win condition, and then the rest of the deck is just finding it and sorting out time counters and that kind of stuff. And that would be a really cool, really fun deck. And it's the kind of stuff that people, when they lose to it, they ask to see it. They ask, how did it work? They ask, wow, that was really cool. They don't go, oh, yeah, a tier 1 deck that costs $1,500. Thanks for beating me with that, buddy. Because I would be like that too if I was a new player. Worm Harvest, again, is a really, really cool card. It's the 5 mana, 2, and then split costs. And it gives you worms equal to the number of lands in your graveyard, which means you have to get lands in your graveyard and Worm Harvest, and then lands in your hand. So you can do some dumb stuff with Life from the Loam if it's... I think it's legal in Modern. I'm pretty sure it is. But you can play a deck that self-dredges and Life from the Loams and then Worm Harvests to win, and you just have a bunch of 1/1 worms, then you make more 1/1 worms. And it just puts you on the back foot a bit, and it's just, again, a cool way to win that isn't necessarily top tier or people have ever heard of. You can just go on to Gatherer right now, and okay, the random card thing. Okay, random card. And we can just click random card until we get a card that we're comfortable building a deck around. So Tsunami, let's see what it is. 4 mana destroy all islands, well that's no good to me. We're going to have to go back and then we're going to have to click another random card. You can just do this, and you can just... See this, 6 mana 4/5, when it enters deal 4 damage to creature with flying. It's not good. I probably wouldn't actually recommend playing it in anything. It's probably too bad to build a deck around. But you could make some sort of artifact deck around it. This is actually perfect. A 1 mana 1/1, so it's not bad. 2 mana, look at the top card of a player's library, and then you can think about how to work with that. You could put that in a Delver of Secrets deck as your way to adjust. It doesn't even adjust it, it just looks at it. You could build some sort of Lantern deck, but without the try-hard stuff, and then have that in and look at their card and then decide to mill it. You could build something around that, and as just clicking around randomly, on the 3rd try we got that. That seems fine. Oh god, empty tab. You can limit yourself to no sideboard. Personally, I would never do this unless the deck I had was so average that I wouldn't feel like there's anything worth sideboarding in and out. But sometimes, if you go to a store and no one else is using a sideboard and you're the only guy there sideboarding, you look like a bit of a tryhard, and it's well within your right to do it, but you seem like a bit of a knob. So if no one else has a sideboard, don't bring one yourself, and if you do bring one, if you do want to build one, just for the, okay, I have this, I have that, I have this, I can think about that, I can sideboard this in, build it, but don't use it unless they have a sideboard. It's a fair meeting point in the middle. You can choose your win condition and then stick to it. So you could say, I am only going to win with sorceries and instants. And then imagine all of your creatures have Defender, or build a deck where they all have Defender, or build a deck where the creatures aren't there to kill people. Like Goblin or Electromancer, the 2-mana 2/2 spells are a bit cheaper. He helps you win with instants and sorceries. If he happens to hit them for 2, that's not how you've won. You could win with a Banefire, and then build Banefire deck where you plan to win by reducing costs. You could choose to win with artifacts, like artifact effects that spawn guys, just artifact creatures, Porcelain Legionnaire. Build a deck full of creatures, all of them have to be Phyrexian creatures with Phyrexian mana costs, and then that's your deck. And then just have colourless mana and then take a load of damage whenever you play stuff or whatever. Play a load of utility lands and trying to adjust stuff. Play an enchantment deck where every creature in it has to be an enchantment creature, or a deck that's nothing but walls and Sphinx's tutelage and wait for them to mill out, or enchantments such as Palace Siege, where every turn they lose 2 life, you gain 2 life. Make that your win condition and then play around it and build a deck around it. Have a win condition of creatures, but that means none of your spells can impact the board or their face, because the only way you're going to win is through hitting them with creatures, so you could make a deck with only creatures in it, for example. That's how you limit your deck, sort of. The biggest thing to think about is feedback. After every game, ask people what they thought about your deck. Ask people what they thought about the cards. If you're there at a casual event and you're dropping Inferno Titans and it's a bit above their level even then, because Inferno Titan's not that good of a card, he's not even modern playable, but he can still be above people and he can still be too good for casual. If some little dude across the table from you says, actually that Inferno Titan dude was complete shit, and when you used a 5-mana spell to give him haste and 1 extra power and trample, that fucked me completely. You can say, well actually, the 5-mana trample card is awful, and the Inferno Titan, fair enough, he's complete shit, I'll replace him with something, and then bring a different deck next week, and then the week after that, come back with the same deck, but don't have the Inferno Titans in it, because some people will just get salty and they'll just say, oh, what a load of shit, I didn't deserve to lose that or whatever. People always are like that. But if someone genuinely seems like they're not too happy about one of the cards you used, for example, if you take Red Green Tron and you can't liberate it, you restart the game because some dude had an infinite life combo and he's really not happy about it, or you play a Wormcoil engine and it's just too good because nobody has ways to exile it. If people complain about it, that's them giving you feedback. So think about it. You don't have to adjust for it, but treat the way people react to your deck as a ban list, and then ban the cards that they react badly to. Likewise, ask them what they think they would add to the deck. Ask them to look through it and ask for advice. Don't, like for me, I'm a Modern and Legacy player. If I turn up to standard FNM with like an average deck that I think and I come second, I can ask people, I don't play standard that often, what do you think you should do with it? And even if they tell you something that's a bad idea or you think is a bad idea, think about making that change just because you can, and just to put you that... Not to be like a dick or anything, but just do it to add that extra layer of difficulty. Like, you give yourself a ban list on what people really don't like to play against, you give yourself a forced to play list based on what people want to see from you. And like I said before, make a new deck every single week, or alternate the decks between the weeks. Don't bring the same deck multiple weeks in a row, especially if you place top 2. If you win an event, do not take that same deck next week, because it will piss people off if they're casually inclined. Some people won't be pissed off, but they'll be like... A new player, see someone come in and win, and they bring the exact same deck next week, they win again, they're like, well, what's the point? Unless I play something as good or better than that, I'm never going to win. It's not good for them, it's not good for the shop, it's not even good for you, because you already won with that deck, so clearly it was good enough to win with, so you have to add more challenge. This is the biggest thing. Themes. So, You can make your own character, come up with some sort of fanboy lore, make your own like fur cossuit or whatever, cosplay as your guy, you bring in some vampire teeth if you're playing a vampire. That don't actually do that. You can if you want. It depends what your store's like. Everything depends on that. But make your own guy. If you want to be a werewolf or whatever, make yourself a werewolf, make himself a backstory, and then build a strategy and a deck that exactly defines that character, and then give someone the deck or whatever and say, can you tell me what sort of person in Magic would play that deck? And if what they're saying isn't similar to what you thought of, like they'll have a completely different interpretation, that's just how it works. But if it's not at least similar, scrap the entire deck, rebuild it. If that's not your thing, pick a strategy for the deck, so not a win condition, don't limit yourself, all that kind of stuff, but pick a strategy that's a bit off. Like build a token deck, like black-white tokens in the modern event deck, but don't use a load of anthems to buff them to bullshit levels. Just play Butcher of the Horde and sacrifice all the tokens, like give him every effect every turn and punch him or that kind of stuff. But if you get rid of all of the anthems, tokens becomes a lot more sub-average, and then giving them Butcher of the Horde is like, it's not a good card, but it's fine enough and it's great for casual environments. I don't know if you've heard of it, but a deck called Sophie's Choice, where you play a load of cards like Browbeat, discard cards, that kind of stuff. I'm trying to think of a load of cards that, like, unless you pick this is going to happen, or unless you do this is going to happen, or it's up to you what happens here. That kind of deck is awesome, because your opponent's fate is entirely in their own hands. If they want to give you a load of cards off of Browbeat, you might draw 2 more Browbeats, and then they'll give you more cards, or they might take 10 damage then. And you can still play it as best as you can, but the deck itself isn't overpowered. And like I mentioned before, a Dredge deck that uses Worm Harvest Life from the Loam, or a Dredge deck that uses Laboratory Maniac to win. It's a strategy that's out there. It's a bit weird, it's a bit off, and that's why it's great for a casual event, because you're not bringing Tier 1, Tier 2, the best you have, to an event and devastating people with it. You can pick a mechanic, a theme that you like, a rule, a word, and then just build something out of that. If you like Madness, build a Madness deck. Madness will never be a good Mon deck, but you can do your damn well best, and you can still win with it, and you can be proud that you won with a Madness deck, because it's still an achievement. It means that you're not just dominating people with tier 1 decks, and then it makes it worthless, because anybody could have done that. But you made the Madness deck, you made it work, you turn one for nothing for what? Well, whatever, like 1 with nothing, that's it. You played that on turn 1 and you won after it. You basically mulliganed yourself to 0, threw it all in the graveyard, and you managed to win. And that makes you awesome. A Delve deck. Delve decks will never be good, because you spend half the time filling your graveyard and the other half the time getting rid of it to play average cards. But do it. Make a deck full of Tassigas and Gurmag Anglers, and just make a Delve deck. Horsemanship I put in for a bit of a joke, but there are horsemanship cards that are modern legal that are fine. Undying, it'll never be a fantastic strategy, but it's worth doing. Flip cards. Build a deck full of nothing but flip cards. I thought of that off the top of my head. If you don't want to pick a strategy, a theme, or a way to win, or you make your own character, pick one card that you really like, play it as a singleton, and imagine that's the guy's lore, and then build a deck around him. So, for example, if you love Huntmaster of the Fells, which is fair enough, he's an awesome card, put him as a one-of. He's the Huntmaster. His wolves are the people that are being hunt-mastered. That's quite cool, actually. Play a load of cards like Blood Moon, Victim of the Night, and don't just play those cards, but when you're playing your opponent, make it seem like you're playing the story, like a Vorthos, rather than playing them and beating them. So, for example, when you Victim of Night him, like, make werewolf sound. No, don't actually, it depends on who you're playing and stuff. Make a spirit deck, fill it with Ghost Quarters and Lingering Souls, both of which are awesome cards, but if you limit yourself to spirits, you're not going to be able to back them up. Like, you're not going to play a Liliana and discard Lingering Souls, you're just going to cast Lingering Souls. You can, like I just mentioned, a deck that tells a story, you could pick Liliana from Origins, play her Flipwalker as a one-of, and then play all of the cards that surround her. Demonic Pact is not a good card. It's not a good card for Modern unless you play around it. If you play in mono black, you have no way to stop that. If that happens, you're fucked. But you play it because it's part of the theme. You'd go back and you'd play Signing Blood because that represents her making deals with demons. Demonic Pact again. Play her Flipwalker because it's her. Play the Tainted Remedy even if you don't have that much healing in it. I mean, it combos with Demonic Pact. You can play all of the cards that surround Liliana and make her who she is, and then you can adjust the rarities based on how often they'd come up. And you can do that, and that makes it a casual deck, and you can build it as spiciest as you can, but because you've limited yourself to Liliana's story cards, you've got such a small pool to pick from, some of the cards are going to be bad, and it's going to put you on an equal field. Even the Urzalans and Khan, which I made the mistake of doing, they tell a story, but they're also one of the top tier on decks in Modern. So you adjust this by not playing Wormgalls. You play one Khan, you play one creature Khan. You play, like, Urza's Rage, I think it's legal in Modern. You play a load of cards that fit it. You don't fill it with Sylvan Scryings, Ancient Stirrings, Chromatic Spheres, Wormcoil Engines, Thragtusks. Those are all really, really good cards for what you want it to do, but they don't fit the story. They don't fit Urza creating Khan and then Venser. Put Venser in it. A blue-white Khan Urzaland Venser deck where Khan exiles Venser, restart the game, bring back Venser, bring him back to life, that kind of stuff. That's if you're more Vorthosy, like if you're a Vorthosy spike like I am, where you're big on lore. If you want to play full-on hard mode, here is the Grasswalker Challenge! Trademark. It's not, actually. Especially for Standard, this is the best thing to do it. I mentioned it before. Start with anywhere from 4 to 12 boosters. 6 is like your average sealed event, and that's a bit low, because everyone else is playing sealed at that point. I think 9 is the perfect number, because that's the same you get from a fat pack. Buy a fat pack of a set you like, or buy 3 of each standard booster. Origins, Zendikar, Oath of the Gatewatch. Buy 3 of each of those, open them all, and then build a deck out of them. But keep everything that you opened in a pool, because that is your collection now. That is all you can imagine that you own. Every week you take either the deck that you built or a new deck that you build from that pool of 90 cards. If you win and get an F&M promo, add that to the pool of cards. If you win a pack as prizes, add that to the pool of cards. If you attend a draft, don't put those in the pool because they're separate. But anything you achieve from the store, or even if you built a red-white human deck out of your stuff and its allies and you're hitting stuff, and you also opened like the green Nissa Planeswalker, trade that for equal value for red-white human stuff and then put that in your collection. But the idea behind this is you're putting yourself on equal or behind footing as the casual players that also have small collections. And it means that you're just playing as if you had a small collection despite the fact you have everything. And you can grow it, so there's progression to be made. You can, if you do good and you succeed, you can add stuff to the pool and then build a different deck next week, because you have to build a different deck if you win. But if you lose, you can strengthen the deck a little bit. If you don't come top 8 in 2 weeks or something, buy a pack from the store, support your local store, buy a pack, and then add it to the pool, and then your deck becomes a little bit stronger. That kind of stuff. You could buy a pack every week if you don't think you're that strong of a spike, or you could add nothing to the pool at all and just play different decks every week. But that's my biggest challenge. Hard mode for grinders, progressionists. That is the single hardest thing you can do. But if you do it, and you don't even have to explain that you're doing any of this stuff to the people at the store, you just have to pretend that that's what you like to do, you just have to pretend that that's what you want to do, even if that isn't what you want to do. If it is what you want to do, you don't have to pretend, because that's great. Like me, I love story decks, I love decks with being based on something. Like, I have a Golgari deck where every card in it is green-black split cost, and then that's pretty much the theme to it. It's just Creekwood Liege, Worm Harvest, Slitherhead, that kind of stuff, all mashed into something. But you can build something like that out of any or all of these limitations, and you'll fit into a casual environment in pretty much no time. Just make sure you don't act too cocky. Don't start bragging like, oh, the only reason you beat me is because I put these limitations on myself. Don't do that. Don't be a knob. I trust you guys to not be knobs. But yeah, that's all of the stuff I can think of that can help guide you into a casual setting. If you wonder what my qualifications are, I've been playing Magic for 5-6 years, and I've been playing casual Magic for 3 or 4 years, despite the fact that I own every card in the game. And I do play competitive Legacy and Vintage and that kind of stuff online. But in paper, I have some of the cutest, lore-most based decks. Like, half of these suggestions are suggestions I put on myself in the past, and have either not worked for me, but I can imagine work for other people, or have worked for me and I still follow them. Especially the theme decks section. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!